لما رحت كنت بحث في التفاسير وكذا وجدت ان الله هو الرزاق مانح الرزق سبحانه وتعالى ومانح القوه والقوي. ان الرزاق ان الله ذو القوه اي القوي سبحانه وتعالى، والمتين مانح القوه عز وجل. فمن هنا اصر اخونا هذا نسيم الصمادي على لفظ التنبيه. ليش نبني الكلام؟ لان المدرب لازم يكون فور ويل درايف، بمعنى ساعات تكون هنا، ساعات تحتاج ان تكون انت متى يكون هنا؟ متى المدرب يحتاج يكون اغلب شيء توجيه؟ لما يكون قاعد يتكلم عن جانب معرفي. انا الحين في هالربع ثلث ساعه اللي فاتت انا هني صح؟ لان انا قاعد عن لكشري، انا لسه ما دخلنا لا تطبيقات ولا تمارين ولا تحضر. فاحيانا يحتاج في جانب التاصيل المعرفي، واحيانا يروح هني. لما يكون هذه ما اقدر اسويها هني وايد، ليش؟ لان انا ما اعرفكم بالدوره. هذه متى اسويها؟ لما يكون جايتني اسماءكم، مناصبكم، احتياجاتكم، بالضبط ايش تبون من الموضوع، اقدر انا اركب دورتي على ان اسد هذا الاحتياج اللي انت جاي من اجله. هذه راح ندشها بعد شوي. يمكن ان دخلت فيها للمحز لما ناقشت بعض قناعاتكم في الموضوع. شنو التمثيل هذا؟ احنا قناعاتنا غير، في اتيتيود عندنا ان نقاط الضعف مهمه. الحين كنا قاعد يقول لنا احمد بوزبر هذا لا سيبوكم منه، كانه قاعد يسوي تشينج اوف اتيتيود. هذه التمثيل. اسالكم في هذا السؤال عشان نخرج من النقطه، نسمع اسئلتكم ونخلصنا اول اربعه من اربعه مرات. بذكر بعض النقاط اللي ممكن تكون نقطة قوة عند أي إنسان.
That's something most of us don't get very much practice because it takes forever, it takes a lot of time. You take a look up here. I would invite you to think about your organization. Your organization, which one of these columns is your organization perhaps kind of aligned with? Which one of these in terms of match? Strategic planning, which again we're talking about. Strategic plan is finite, it's fixed, where we end up with a product. We end up with a strategic plan. That plan is a product, where it's usually based on quantitative data, quantitative analysis. Okay, it's usually a whole string of metrics. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a great strategic plan. And I work with strategic plan. You need a strategic plan. You need metrics in place. You need solid metrics in place. You need good analysis. And we need that. We need strategic plan. Okay? We also need strategic thinking, which is a renewable and a generative and a recreative process that just keeps going. Okay? There's not a finite place. There's not an end sum to it. It has lots and lots of factors, lots and lots of dimensions to it. This is something that if we don't know the difference between strategic planning and strategic thinking, we can go crazy. We can start going crazy when we start pulling multiple perspectives in. People will say, don't we have this done? We're not going to go back and revisit it. We get agitated. We get really irritated. So we need to know, are we in strategic thinking mode or are we in strategic planning mode? Is when we're talking about strategic thinking. Because I promise you, it doesn't happen between the four walls of work. It happens outside, and that's because we don't chew on our bone at the table, right? We take it, and it just kind of stays with us, and we have access to it, that we pull it in and pull it out and let go of it as needed. So this is something we want to pay attention to. This has to do with informal learning, and I think a lot of us in a learning sort of role think that formal learning is the only thing that we want to pay attention to. But there's this whole aspect, this whole dimension of informal learning that is actually more powerful than formal learning. And I would invite you over the course of the day, and as you go back, to think about things in your history, things in your family, things in your society, things in your company, things in your business. Those best decisions, those biggest decisions, those most high impact decisions, where are they usually made? They're usually not made at work. They're usually not made at work. They're usually made after you've had dinners, and after you've had walks, and after you've had conversations, and by doing things. Those really critical, major, big decisions are not usually made at work. And I have an enormous volume of data that substantiates this, in terms of military decisions, in terms of public policy decisions, in terms of business decisions. They're not made at work. They're formalized at work. They're formalized between the four walls, but they're made informally. And this whole informal aspect of learning is something that I think is often given short shrift. It's often given very short attention because we're so focused on the formal learning. And I think it's important to pay attention. Yes.
I have one query. You can correct me if I'm wrong. If you what you mean about thinking, for example, now we're in the workshop and we have a concept and information. Maybe we go out and we walk and unconsciously we think about it too. Is that what you mean? So that means it will happen to us all the time. During our driving or walking, even if we are sitting here, we think about something else.
This is something we often don't pay attention to because we often think stuff that we're thinking about outside work, it doesn't have application to what happens in work. It's actually where the best thinking comes from because we do, especially problems. We don't usually solve problems at work. We usually solve problems yes, unconscious, because that's where our unconscious mind starts to take action.
You have that aha moment. You have that aha moment and you go, oh, I solved it, right?
Yeah, and a lot of times that aha moment, it doesn't happen until after we've really grappled with an issue, until we've really struggled with an issue.
But then deadlines, aren't they a huge deterrent? They're just so, I have to do this, I have to do this in this time frame, people are depending on it.
Deadlines, when it comes to strategy, when it comes to strategy, deadlines are a killer. They're just a killer. Because with strategic planning, we're very deadline driven, okay? We're very deadline driven. And all that does is it moves our level of thinking to lower levels of thinking. What we want to do is, again, pay attention. There's nothing wrong with being deadline driven. But in terms of higher level thinking, a lot of times the deadline can actually work against us.
There are many people, they have great ideas, great thinking, but unfortunately they don't know how to convert this thinking and ideas into a strategic format.
Yeah. And this is the linkage. A lot of times we cut those ideas off prematurely in terms of thinking. A lot of times as learning facilitators, we cut ideas off prematurely because we believe it goes back to this assumption that we shared with us earlier about a lot of times we think if I can't see a result, okay, your thinking isn't valuable. Where the best thinking is it's generative. It happens over and over and over and over. It's filled with flawed thinking that needs to be corrected. That's the generative and the iterative part that goes over and over. A lot of times we learn because of timelines and deadlines. Okay, that's enough time. Okay, it's from here on, from this point here on, it's wasted time. We just cut ideas off. We cut ideas off. And it's just something to pay attention to. Something to pay attention to. So going back here in terms of things that we want to pay attention to, this whole concept and notion of informal learning. Thinking is a human function. It's like breathing. It's that we learn, we're course corrected about thinking through our culture, through our families, through our educational institutions, through our facilitators of learning. We're channeled. We become channeled. Informal learning has happened long before there were formal institutions. Because like I said, thinking is a human function. And formal institutions. Formal institutions have actually become a canceller in terms of value in formal learning, where we've learned that what happens in a formal setting has higher value than what happens in an informal setting. Okay? We know this also in terms of working with populations that are not literate. Populations that are not literate is not that people don't think they're not literate. People can think, and so we don't credit it because most of their thinking is going to happen informally and it doesn't fit our constructs in terms of formal thinking. Strategic thinking is generative and iterative, as we said. That means it's very messy. It's back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. It's very, very messy. And we get frustrated by that because we want, and we tend to want metrics. Okay, we love metrics. But there's a lot of our best thinking that's actually not measurable. And that frustrates us because this is where we learn. If it can't be measured, it doesn't count. Well, actually, some of the best decisions and deeper decisions can't be measured. Okay? So it's a polarity, it's a contradiction that we have to grapple with and have to deal with as learning facilitators. This deeper level and different level of thinking, that's what we're talking about today. This and thinking, which is polarity thinking. I mentioned the other day, and thinking, polarity thinking requires the highest level of cognition that exists that we're at least currently aware of. I'm pointing out some of these polarities because polarity thinking requires paying attention to what I call tension spots. And you're identifying some of these tension spots where you're saying, wait a minute, on the one hand, we're expected to do this, and on the other hand, do this. I can't work with both of those. I can't work with that tension. I'm inviting you to practice it. I'm inviting you to consider, to pay attention to what are some of the tension spots in your daily life. What are some of the tension spots in terms of strategy decisions you have to make? One of the telltale signs of a strategy is that it possesses, it consists of, it contains.
And then it's appropriate for small groups like this. And again, I've done groups of 200 plus 300. All right, so it just depends. So that's what process facilitation is. But let's talk about what it isn't, because sometimes that's a little bit easier. So it's not a Master of Ceremonies role. Right? You've all done the Master of Ceremonies thing. Right? You stand up and you're in charge and you say, okay, the first person to speak is this person, and now we're going to hear from so that Master of Ceremonies. That's not what process facilitation is. Process facilitation is, again, much more structured, involved, and it's a plan, right? It's not appropriate for all meetings, right? So your communications meeting, probably not going to be a process facilitated type of a meeting. Now there's some things that we'll learn today that will help those kinds of meetings, but not all meetings are process facilitation types of meetings. It's not a last minute exercise. I think I mentioned yesterday, if you were up there, I get calls all the time. Kent, I need somebody to facilitate this meeting. Will you help me? Oh, when is it? Tomorrow afternoon? I can't do it tomorrow afternoon. It takes a lot of work and a lot of planning and a lot of effort. So it's not a last minute thing. It's a plan. Because remember, we talked about we've got schedules and things to go through. It also, more importantly, is not effective if you already have an answer. Have you been in those meetings?
It's not effective?
Yeah. Process facilitation is not effective if you already have an answer. So, Najib, let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in a meeting where your boss stands up and says, okay, we're going to brainstorm some ideas on how to get our organization working better? Is that okay? So, Najib, do you have any ideas? Do you have a suggestion? Oh, that's not what I was thinking. Come up with something better. Oh, yeah. Do you have something? Oh, you've got an idea? No, that's not what I'm thinking. Good idea, but not what I was thinking. Right, so we're not brainstorming at all. I know exactly what I want you to say. I'm just trying to get you to say what I want you to say.
Actually, they say, we want to do this, but let's brainstorm.
But let's brainstorm to see if this is really what we want to do. But this is what we're going to do.
At the end, they're going to do this anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. So if you're going to do a process facilitation, you don't want to do it if your client already has an answer. Because you're going to go through all this process and all this information and get feedback from everybody. And then you're going to stand up and say, oh, thanks for your feedback, guys, but that's really not what we're going to do anyway. We're going to do something else. How does that make you feel? Why did I come to the meeting, right? So again, another reason why process facilitation doesn't work is if the client already has an answer. You don't want to do that. It doesn't work. Any questions? Pretty clear? Here's the types of meetings that work for process facilitation. Strategy meetings. Right? And again, you're thinking, you're trying to develop strategy, you're building, you need input, you need some ideas to do strategy. Project planning, project status meetings. So we're in the middle of a project, and now let's see where the status is, and we need to report, and we need to talk about, are we on the right track, or we need to change. Issue resolution, we have issues that we need to resolve. Process improvement, process re-engineering, information needs analysis, process procedure design. Those are the real solid kinds of meetings that make a lot of sense for process facilitation. What's not up there?
The regular communication.
The regular communication meeting kinds of meetings, right? Now, we're going to learn some things today that will help you in those meetings, but as far as the overall big picture process facilitation, those kinds of meetings, probably not as effective. Good. What kind of meeting is this? If you were to say, what kind of a meeting are we having? And again, it's a little bit of a stretch, but what would you say this kind of a meeting would be?
Involves a lot of interaction,
Okay.
and sometimes it's not the typical meeting. The type of meeting that you have the introduction, discuss.
Right.
It has a lot of steps.
Okay. If you were to choose one of these up here, what kind of a meeting? What do you think we're doing today?
Process improvement.
Process improvement. Good. How do you improve our meetings so it can kind of be under process improvement? Good. Okay.
Now I see all of them.
They kind of all fit into this a little bit. We're kind of strategizing. What are we going to do to make our meetings better? Right? Yeah. Okay. So you can kind of take a look and see, and I'm going to show you again. I'll show you this plan, and you'll understand when you see my plan why I don't want to do this for communication meeting. This would be something a little more involved. Okay? So these are kind of the kind of ideas or areas that we really want to use process facilitation for. All right? So let's go back here. We've talked about why process facilitation, right? What it is, what it isn't, when you use it. Now we're going to talk about key meeting derailers. We're going to go back to our whys, and we're going to try and figure some things out. We're going to talk about what those derailers are and figure out ways. Once we get that all done, we're going to figure out how can we address those derailers so that we make sure that we don't have those problems and issues. Now, it's about 9:45. Now's a great time for a break if you'd like a break.
Sure.
Is a good time?
Yep.
Okay. How long of a break do you want? 10 minutes? 15 minutes?
15, I think is more.
15? Okay. I'll just set my timer up here so you can come in and take a look. I'll set it for 15 minutes. We'll just take a 15 break. I know there's drinks and stuff out here and snacks. Men's room.
That's too extreme, huh?
Well, look, May 26, 2010, May 26, 2011, a year later, different facility, 20-year-old worker commits suicide. Same company.
Why don't they just resign for that?
Gets better. They're the #1 producer of products for Apple. People start seeing this, and of course they attribute it to Apple. January 16, 2012, Apple's share price hits record high. The same day, Apple agrees to rights monitors. Do you really believe that Apple wants to have people going into their production facilities doing this? Do they want this article in the newspaper? See, these examples are extreme, but I'm trying to illustrate to you, when we get this right, we create value for firms. I know this because I've seen 100 studies that say it. When we get this wrong, we destroy value for firms, we destroy value for people. Right? Our decisions are not trivial decisions. And these are good examples to illustrate how the firm, there's nothing inherently wrong with these individuals, there's nothing inherently wrong with the capabilities. Right? The firm is utilizing them, they're answering these 5 questions in a way that is destroying value. They're getting it wrong.
And then there's another way, destroyed value for Apple in a practical way from the product point of view. A lot of people don't realise that the quality issues Apple have are immense, and you can see why.
If I am doing
Product failure
this,
is very high.
do you really think every single iPad I'm making is going to be of high quality? If I mean, the day before this person committed suicide, what was their, do you really want that iPod they made? No. You're not getting high quality product out of this individual that's about to jump off the building because the working conditions are so stressful. This is destroying value on a high level. Human value, financial value, social value, and this is all coming back to our decisions about how we manage people. So, I guess I'm trying to illustrate to you, all right, what I want you to know at this point. Firms compete by the ability to accumulate resources. Resources that are valuable, unique, and hard to imitate, those are the ones that drive long-term value, period. People can be those things in organizations, but that means they have to have valuable, unique, and hard to imitate human capital and social capital. And then we have to figure out a way to make it work. And we do that by asking 5 broad questions that cover the essence of what HR is about. Selection, training and development, evaluation, rewards, organization. That's what we do. And when we do that right, we generate value. When we do that wrong, we destroy value. So the question becomes, how do we do it right? Right? How do you unlock the productive potential of the human and social capital? 2 things. Right? And we know this intuitively. Make sure that the people are knowledgeable about things that are useful. Right? And create opportunities to take advantage of this knowledge. And that knowledge can be the human capital or the social capital. Now, all of this makes sense, but I underline this one word. Because this is the hardest part about it. Oftentimes we focus on this because this is about creating policies and procedures. And this is what HR does. But that's not the hard part. This is the hard part. And I'll illustrate my point to you. So I'm working with the organization. They say, we would like your help because we're having difficulty recruiting for a position. And I go, okay, fine. Can I see the job description? And the job description is very extensive. It's got like 50 attributes that they're looking for. And I go, this is probably difficult to find somebody who do these things. And they said, yes, this is what we'd like your help. And I said, well, of these 50 things, how many of them do they really do 90% of the time? And the person says, oh, about 10. I said, well, why don't you just focus on getting those 10 and not worry about the other 40? And then there's this awkward moment of silence. And you know what's going on? They don't know which 10. And what they're doing is they're hedging. And we talk about hedging in the financial sector, right? Why do we hedge? Because we don't know. We're trying to deal with risk. But risk is associated with lack of knowledge. If I knew, I wouldn't need to hedge, right? And the difficulty with hedging, of course, is hedging is expensive, right? You much rather not do it because it's expensive. And that's the same thing when it came in this situation. So because they were hedging, they had to pay a lot of money for a person that can do a whole lot of things, but they didn't actually know what the person needed to do. And there's another problem with that. Let's say I hire a person that can do 50 things, but I only have them do 10. What is that person going to be like? Bored. And you know what bored people do? No, stressed out people do that. Bored people leave.
Just leave both ways.
Right. Just one is leaving in a permanent way. Yes.
Resigning is way.
It could be the other way around. They may influence the rest.
Right. I get bored of my job. I start coming up with other things for people to do, which may or may not be what you want them to do. Right? If I'm bored, I can start talking about how do we kidnap our boss? Let's talk about that today over lunch.
Bold leader.
Yes. Right? This is a lose-lose situation. And the first thing we had to talk about was not a new recruitment process or a new selection tool or, listen, you don't know what's useful to your organization. And until you figure that out, you're not going to be able to implement any successful practice. So this is the key component to it. And, I'm an academic, and we spend a lot of time trying to simplify the world and maybe oversimplifying the world. And people criticize us for doing 2x2s, right? But I think there's a 2x2 that I use that makes good sense to me. And, if I think about it, what you want in an organization, just abstractly, just set aside. What you really want is you want people who know stuff and can do stuff that nobody else can do. Hard to replace, right?
in the place?
I didn't know that.
We're just near the
One day, 2 days, 3 days, there is another hormone, which is cortisol, will tell you, please, wait a minute, stop. You have to stop, you have to shut down in order to charge yourself. So that this cortisol will say, wait a minute, you have to just sit down. That's why when you come from work, lie in the couch. Nobody did the child will tell you, let's go, come in, for the homework. Please leave me alone. What is this? This is now, after forgetting, the adrenaline at work, now the cortisol is jumping in and telling you, please calm down, shut down for a minute, just to relax. Now, when you know that this is what is happening in your body, depending on your kind of thoughts, the adrenaline gets up, and if you focus to increase the level of adrenaline as much as we can. To keep the adrenaline, like driving the car, when it is more than 120, you have to take your left in order to decrease, the adrenaline. If you wait a lot, then the cortisol will jump in and calm you down. So what is the way now? To charge yourself, to charge your body cell phone, you have to put a charger whenever the adrenaline is getting up, when early warning sign. We call it your tone. When you hear your tone, just level up. The problem with the stress is like, heating the water here. Heating the water, they say, if there is frog. If there is a frog inside the water, the frog, when you put, a boiling water and you throw the frog there, the frog will jump. Be good, okay? But when you put a cold water, okay, and put the frog there, and then start heating a bit slowly, the water, what is happening? That the frog will stay, okay? Then 20, 30, 40, 60, and then they find, that his muscles just get weak, and then to reach 100 and then gets. It is the same thing like the stress. If you forget about the signs, the adrenaline will get 20, 30, 40. If you don't decrease, the heat there, it will come time that you feel, you're so exhausted, and this is the exhaustion that cortisol is there. Okay, so what should we do? Now, in the first day, why this is important about the hormones? When we speak about the hormones, it's important because you have control, and this is what is missing. You have the control, the full control. Now, let's see one thing that, some employees, they hate it, but this is truth. Usually, when we come the first day, they say stressful situations, okay? And I tell them you have 3 choices. For any stressful situation, you have 3 choices. Either the work is, going with me or without me, let's leave it. This is a problem and it will continue, and that's the company, that's the work. Let's leave it. This is leave it. The problem, if you leave it, the stress gets more and more. The second option is adapt to it. You have no choice. You have to adapt to it. The problem with adapt to it, you have 2 choices. Either adapt to it in positive way or adapt to it in a negative way. Now, what we will tell here, what we will discuss here, how to adapt to it in a positive way. Because you have the choice.
it is totally your choice to put, to adapt to it in a negative way. But the real stress relief is not just the adaptation. The real stress relief is to change it. To try to change it. And in this business model, we are telling the employees, please give us a practical way to change it. Because now if you are telling me, this is the balloon, and then you are putting the pressure. Please, balloon, please adapt to it in a positive way. I will adapt, I will try my best, but please, there is a pressure there. Please relieve the pressure so that I can adapt positively.
Had it at a very strategic. It wasn't intended for our senior management, maybe 2006 or 2005. But they looked at Saudi Aramco as part of a strategic change in the entire company. The company changes, the company doesn't change, what will happen? If the company doesn't change, but the country changes, etc. And for each scenario, they had looked at